Dogs have evolved special socio-cognitive abilities which enable them to interact and communicate with humans. The connection between a human and a dog, and the dog's ability to recognise facial cues or scent, demonstrates humans as the highly relevant social partners of dogs. Various studies have been undertaken to understand the dog's tendency to select a human based on their behaviour. This study by Marie, Alicia, Julianne and Michael, named Dogs Evaluate Humans on the basis of direct experiences only, focuses on human attention and the role it plays in the interaction between a human and a dog. It will investigate if dogs use indirect experiences or direct experiences to choose between two human experimenters, one being nice and one being ignoring. Based on prior studies, it is suggested that the dogs will always choose the nice experimenter after a direct experience and an indirect experience. The first experiment investigates if dogs use information about behaviour of individuals after a direct experience. The dogs used were unfamiliar with both experimenters and show a motivation to interact with strangers according to their owners. Experience trials were undertaken first. Each dog was given a period of interaction with the nice experimenter and a separate period of interaction with the ignoring experimenter. The dogs then undertook experimental trials. As you can see in the experimental trials, the nice experimenter was placed here and the ignoring experimenter was placed here. The dog was then brought into the room and placed here. The helper then released the dog and the dog was able to move about the room freely. Each experimenter remained in the same position with a neutral facial expression. Two measurements were made: the dog's first choice between experimenters and the duration that the dog stayed in the proximity of each experimenter. The results showed that the dogs did not prefer to approach any of the experimenters more often. However, when looking at the median time spent in the proximity of the experimenters, the dogs seemed to stay closer to the nice experimenter longer than the ignoring experimenter, as seen by the graph. The second experiment investigated indirect experience. In this experiment, the dogs did not interact directly with the two experimenters. Instead, they observed the two experimenters interacting with the third party, a demonstrator dog, as seen in the image. Experimental trials were undertaken exactly the same as in Experiment 1. The results of the experiment show that the dogs do not show any preference when first approaching the experimenters. This is a similar situation when looking at the duration spent in the proximity of each experimenter, as seen by the graph. Overall, in Experiment 2, the dog's behaviour towards the two experimenters showed little difference. In conclusion, this study illustrates that dogs rely on a direct experience to select a human based on their behaviour. This was seen in Experiment 1, when the dogs preferred to stay in the proximity of the nice experimenter longer than the ignoring experimenter. However, there was no evidence that supported their hypothesis that dogs also use indirect experience to select a human. This was seen in Experiment 1, when the dogs did not show any preference between the two experimenters. Overall, in order for dogs to select their social partners, they use the knowledge gained by direct experiences with humans instead of indirect experiences.